Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Memorial Drive family. Did I say family? Did I say?
You said family.
It sounded to me like I said flamily.
I never listened to you. No, I'm kidding. You said family very clearly.
Welcome to our world. I more and more am talking and thinking, am I having a stroke while I'm speaking?
Strokes aren't funny, but that thought was funny.
Right. Yeah. These things make me nervous as somebody who talks for a living. Is that weird? Yeah, so this is already a weird episode. This is going to be a different conversation. Let's say that it's going to be a different conversation since we both preached yesterday. And one of the things we often talk about are what are the things that you wish you would have said, but you didn't have enough time. But I know I, for one, spoke a lot more time than I was supposed to yesterday.
That's right.
So
I think we both were equal offenders, if you will.
I apologize to Shane afterwards for that. And he was very kind. Very kind. But
I don't apologize anymore because he doesn't believe me. So
let's start today with your the session that you lead after the sermons. This got me thinking.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, we do a session after the sermon on a Zoom call called This Got Me Thinking. And in that call, I facilitate the conversation, but it really is just everybody sharing how the service and maybe life in general has got them thinking about the things of God. Just a great, I just love it. I have a lot, I learn a lot of energy. So yeah, I think there were 13 of us on the call yesterday, and just really rich. A few things that came around that I remember is the dynamic of the plank. We're talking in this sermon about the tactics of the devil, and I remember us talking about look, every time a preacher talks about sin, it feels like they're just sharing God is accusing you. Tim, I see that you're struggling with this sin, and what that says to you is I and God are judging you and we're mad at you. And then when you see God talking about sin to saved people, he will say, you used to do this. Don't get caught up in that. It's not, even if there was sin, he's very much in the letters. He's saying, look, Christians, remember this is not of God, but he's not saying, I can't wait to critique you. I can't wait to condemn you. It's the opposite of God's spirit. And so it's just so much more useful, and I believe more biblical to understand. Temptation is an invitation to sin posed by the devil. The devil's coming to us just like he did to Jesus and saying, hey, here's how this works. And the key there is he wants it to seem easier than God's way, So for me to steal from you would be easier to trust God to provide for me, or for me to lie to you, it's easier to trust God with the difficulty of telling the truth and those kind of things. But these are his tactics to get you not to trust God. And that's kind of the point of our sermon and where we're going to go. And then we talk towards the end about how do we help each other when we notice sin in each other, because we need each other.
Yeah.
But because it's like a pendulum, if you came from a church background where the only time your sin was discussed is when you were being accused and corrected, and there was the thought was, you better do this right now. Like, you better never struggle with this again. Well, when you leave that point of view, you tend to go way over here, which is we just won't talk about sin anymore. Yeah. Even in our sermons, we're just not going to discuss it anymore. And that idea, that's when you see it that way, you're like, oh yeah, that's not right. But how do we talk about it like God did? And we talked about the Matthew 7, where he talks about the plank and the speck, and just that idea that and I had people say, I have the plank, others have the speck. And that is only true all the time. Every second of every day, I have the plank, you have the speck. And the thing, and I'll pose this question to you, who removes the plank? That's a question that we kind of process some. Who is it that removes the plank in that story?
Well,
so I pose it to you, Mr. Rush.
Yeah. So my off the top of my head, not prepared, would say I do that I pull the plank out.
Right. And so somebody was saying, I believe our friend Tracy was saying, he has had multiple surgeries on his eye. And I told him, I said, I need to just let you preach that one day, but he had multiple surgeries on his eye. And so he spent a lot of time thinking about how glad he is that the person removing these things from his eyes, which you can hardly barely see, you know what I mean? So it's microscopic kind of work, but how glad he is that that person doesn't have a plank in his eye,
Mm.
you know? But in order for Tracy to remove, he can't remove it on his own. What is a speck to the doctor has to remove it. But the doctor has to have somebody remove it from him if he has something like that in his eye. You see what I'm saying? Like, we need each other's help. And I asked him, I said, so who is the doctor in this case? And he said, well, that's God. And I think it's one of those things that when you say it out loud, you're like, well, yeah, of course, God, you know, but it's my free will allowing God to remove it. And I didn't say it that way yesterday. And I think that is a good, that's a very clarifying, needed statement. It's like, I don't overcome anything on my own. Even when I'm in Christ, I don't come into Christ and then I get all his teachings and I'm like, I'm on my own now. I'm independent of God. It's
Yeah.
the opposite. I become more dependent of God. So it's just really interesting. And there's more that was said there, but yeah, what does that make you think of when you hear that?
Well, I tell you, I feel like I'm overstating this. What I want to say is this view of the log and the speck has, what I want to say is it makes me more grateful for recognizing the specks in other people because it gives me a chance to look at the log instead of being angry and judgmental. It lets me know, hey, this is a blind spot. Truth is, I don't know that I can say that honestly. That's where I want to be. I want to be where now it's an opportunity for me. But the truth is, it's still hard. It's still difficult. It, it's difficult to sit still and believe. All right, this, as angry as I am with this person, it's really about my log, and um, I need to look at it and examine it. And I think we have some spiritual practices that help us do that. We probably need to come up with more, and we probably need to make those more popular. The ones that do help us really sit with our own log. Um, the ones that I know of, it involves community, though. It involves coming alongside each other, joining with others, and it's crazy. The more we talk about these things, the more we realize they're risky. It's not that we don't do them because we're lazy. It's we don't do it because it's risky. It's hard to put ourselves in vulnerability with each other like that.
Yeah. My mind goes 100 directions there. That idea though, you said it yesterday, and it was kind of funny. I want to just speak this out loud. So when we came to the end of our sermon, I had said something, and in practice, I think I had said, whatever you say, if you close it, that's fine, and if you don't, I'll close it. But you said, and you didn't say this in when we practiced together, but you said, this is really risky, but we'll get through it together. And I had to process that. Like, my mind usually is going a billion miles an hour, but I processed that and I was like, why is it risky? Yeah, it is very risky. And all of a sudden I realized I have nothing to say to that. Like, it needs to end right there. So I think what I said was, that's true. That is true. And then it's like we just decided, and we're
And
done.
we're done.
Like, poor Nathan Strickland, he's like, am I to get up now, or is there a
Was that
second
it?
act?
I when we got yeah. So as we're speaking, it dawned on me that okay, so we watch a show called Community where they do a spoof on Law and Order, and the two guys are trying to have the witty pun on the murder that sends them to commercial. I don't know if that makes sense, but they keep doing the pun, and one does
Right.
the pun, and it should be bump bump commercial, but the other one's like, no, I've got the pun. No, I've got the pun. And finally, one of them says, we can't both end it. And I just had this image of both of us like, and now do we close it? I think this is where we close it. Is this where we close it? And oh man, when it got to that, I was like, will this be the end of it? I don't know if this is the right way to end it.
Yeah.
All right, we've had a long enough pause. This was the end of it.
Yeah. And it's like we did have that knowing look, but then it was funny. It's like it had these reverberations that's still in my head, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, to that idea of risk, I think a couple things. We were saying in the conversation yesterday that we have to recognize that when we talk about taking a risk, we're not talking about taking that risk in front of 300 people at Memorial Drive Church of Christ on a Sunday morning. Now, there are times where that is what God wants people to do. You and I both can remember people saying things in front of the whole congregation that were confessional and beautiful and powerful, and man, did our church need it. We really needed it. In most cases, though, I think the smaller is the better. And what that means is you have to be intentional about spending life with the smaller group.
Yeah.
You can't just get into the middle of something and be like, I just need 3 random people here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which means you have to make, and that's where we've kind of fallen down on this, is most of us think of church as I come on a Sunday morning or whenever they schedule it, and I show up and I sit here, and it's by and large spectator. Yeah. And it doesn't get intimate. So we have to invest outside of those times, those structured times, to be able to develop that. And it's in the framing of Jesus. You know, Jesus he had a multitude, at times thousands of people, but you don't see him talking about any weakness there. You know what I mean? He's got 500 disciples, it says he appears to after his resurrection. He's got 72 that he sends on mission. He's got 12, and then he's got 3 that he's especially close to, you know? And I think it's not the numbers as much as just he loved all those people, but he invested differently. Yeah. And I think there's something to investing in a few, and it could be a few that are all invested in each other, or it could be me and you and me and this other person, me and this other person. But it's that idea of I think that's, how do I say this? It's not just, man, when we're talking about saying, yeah, I need to own the fact that I really struggle with gluttony. That's a temptation that the devil gets me on a lot. I don't need to say that in front of everybody. You know, I can, but it could be just as powerful or more powerful to say it to one person that I really trust with it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the New Testament clearly says, confess your sins one to another. And maybe we've not unpacked that well as a body. Not, I mean, Memorial Drive, I mean, Christendom. Why that's beautiful, why there's grace in that. But it feels like, hey, this is something that you need for healing. And so start deciding now, who is that one another? Start investing in that relationship, start building that, grow that, because you need this for health. So start making that decision while it's in your power to decide who that's going to be.
Yeah, and I think I know a lot of times, well, how would you do that? For me, and this is true of the last places I've lived. I've lived obviously in Tulsa with Memorial Drive for years, but it's the idea, when you don't know, start praying about it. Start praying specifically about it. God, I believe you have people. If you have me living here, Acts 17 says you put us in the places and the times so we can connect with God. And part of connecting with God is connecting to God's people. And you say, God, who are my inner 2 or 3, And I would just pray about it. And in my experience, if I was praying about it consistently, that meant I was looking consistently. I'm not just praying and forgetting about it. I'm praying and then watching. And all of a sudden I'd find myself in a conversation here or a conversation there. And then I'd say, hey, we should get coffee. We should sit down. We should get lunch. Let's spend some more time together. And then God developed it. Now with some, I would spend lunch, coffee, nothing happened there. I mean, God may have done something, but there wasn't this knitting of the souls. But with others, God just kept it up, and I just stayed with it. Now, one of the things that we all find is there was risk in that, because you'd hit these points and you're like, I want to tell the truth here. Will the relationship stand it? Will it be able to hold this? And I think that there is risk there, but you're trying to make this trade. You're trying to trade the safety you can control for the safety that God provides.
Yeah.
Because even if I say, hey, Tim, I need you to know I've confessed sin to people over the years. And later I was like, I shouldn't have done that. Like it came back at me in a way that was really discouraging. But I learned from that, and I thought, God's going to get me through this. That doesn't stop me from believing he will provide my Peter, James, and John, as it were. Yeah. And I think that's what we're doing, is we're constantly trading my human control for what God is offering.
Yeah, I really like that. When we talk about bathing something in prayer, I feel like this is one of those areas where if this is what you want to go for, prayer makes sense. As much as we say we'll pray about something and then, do we? Yeah, if we want a safe place to be open and honest, it's even liberating to know, hey, I can pray about that. And I think God will show up. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about how you and I joke about 90% of leadership is saying, all right, let's get started. Somewhere along the way, you have to be the first one in the pool. You've got to be willing to trust. Okay, I've prayed about this. God has provided this person or these people in front of me, and I've got to be the one that jumps into the pool and begins the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the illustration, when I first started thinking about the whole devil's tactics and how do we shift our mindset, because I don't want every time I get done preaching, because I'm on display, as it were, for people to always come up and say, hey, I noticed you gained 5 pounds. You know what I mean? I don't want that, but I do appreciate the person that deeply cares about me and has prayed a lot about it and removed their own plank and says, yeah, I think this is something God's given me, and come to me and said, hey, how can I help you with this? What can I do to encourage you in this? And specifically about losing weight, you know what I mean? Now it would be a challenge to me if we weren't in deep relationship. It would be harder for me to hear it in a trusting way if we weren't in that deeper investor relationship. But in those with the deep investor relationship, I need to hear it. Now I want to be really clear. Your weight has many different, reasons why you're the weight you are. I mean, 2 of those reasons are diet and exercise, but there's a lot of other reasons. What I'm specifically talking about when I talk about my weight is my weight gain as a function of me being a glutton. That's what I'm talking about here. So if somebody has a weight problem, I'm not talking to everybody that carries extra weight. I'm not saying it's more godly to be skinny than not. What I'm talking about specifically with part of my struggle, and part of my struggle is genetic, but part of it is I just overeat, and it's filling a void that I need to turn over to God more. So for somebody to come up and say to me, hey, is there anything I can do? How can I be praying for you? How can I encourage you? That matters a lot if I'm thinking I'm at war with the devil and this person is trying to encourage me to keep fighting against the devil, or I think this person just doesn't like how I am or who I am or whatever. And it's that picture of peace. Do I think we're at peace and this guy's bothering me at peace, or do I think we're at war and he's helping me in my war? And that's where we've been building this for a while, but that idea is no one is your enemy except the devil. I mean, the devil may surface through people, but he's that ultimate enemy. And if I keep, that's why this perspective is so important.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And I tell you, it's a touchy subject. It is so hard to, I would say this is something in the church that it's uncomfortable and it's risky. And I don't even think we label it uncomfortable and risky. It's one of those places where we have forgotten we're talking about spiritual warfare. We're not aware. And so we just put it in a, let's not talk about this closet.
Right. And I've always compared it to, if you were raised in a household that when your dad got back, before your dad got back, your mom would say, when your dad gets home, he's going to discipline you. And when your dad gets home, he just beats the tar out of you. Okay. And you grow up with that. Then you get married, you have a kid, after a year or two, the kid starts to push back after 3 or 4 or 5, the kind of thing. And then you come home from work and your wife says, I've told little Johnny, you're going to go discipline him. Your response very well may be, I will never discipline Johnny.
Yeah.
Because the word has become distorted, Yeah. It's this misapplication. Discipline isn't beating someone. I mean? Discipline is investing in their teaching so they learn how to function as a child of God. And so, but a lot of times when we talk about, the word confrontation, that sounds so, I would never want to have I avoid confrontation. All confrontation means is come face to face. That's literally the meaning of the word. Come face to face, honestly, but it's become ugly, partially, maybe largely, because I've never seen it done positively, or I've seen it done so rarely positively.
Yeah.
Most of the time when I see somebody challenge somebody, it's been very ugly, over the top. There was a lot of nerves. There was no peace at all in it. And it was just, I'm going to get my way. And the only thing the other person can do is admit I'm entirely right and they're entirely wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's not godly confrontation. That's certainly not removing a speck, kind of language. And I think it's that important. Everything I think about something, I think that way for a reason. And so if you hear the idea of somebody coming to you to share, hey, I think the devil's attacking you in this way, and you hear that as threatening, and I get it. I mean, I'm with you, but you learned it as threatening. And we're trying to say, wait a minute, does God offer something better there in the scripture?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of the word admonish. I remember learning that means to put it in your ear. And it frees that up. Like, oh, okay, I could admonish somebody. I don't have to be in their face. I don't have to make it clear I am right, you are wrong. It can be, so I feel like I use the phrase, let me put this on the table. Just let me put this out there. What do you want to do with that? And then the listener has the choice of do they want to think about it? Do they want to just know that doesn't fit and move on?
The first time I ever experienced godly confrontation that I know of. Let me give you a flip. So I don't know if I've ever told you this. This is the bad story, then I'll share the good story. So, and it's my poor mom, doing her best she could. But when I was 16 years old, I went to a graduation party of somebody else's, and it was one of those all city where they rented out the whole hotel and they had swimming and dancing and everything. So I am out on the dance floor dancing, and all of a sudden, it's a dark place there in this hotel, and I'm dancing, and all of a sudden somebody comes in with this huge flashlight, and it's so annoying, and I'm like, oh, trying to get away from it, don't think anything of it. That's a Friday night. The next day at noon, my mom, I hear yelling my name, and she's like, get out here. And I was still sleeping, I was up late. So I come out, and there I am on TV dancing. Okay. And my mom gives me this stank eye, because now I've embarrassed her publicly, because we don't dance, right? Because Jesus would never dance, except they said anyway, no, beside the point. Moving on. So then I get home on Sunday after church, and there are 3 tracks laying on my bed about lasciviousness and dancing in lust. And that's it. But I mean, if I would have come to her and said, hey, I do like to dance, I've got good rhythm, this kind of thing, it would have been a big fight. I mean, the only right answer was, do you understand what you did was awful and evil? Never do that again. And so that was kind of how I grew up. And I'm fortunate, because I know other people would get an hour and a half lecture. So at least I got as little as I got. So when we were on the Ecuador team and you were my assistant, okay, and your female counterpart,
I was afraid I was going to make an appearance in this story.
yeah, no, you're not bad or good. I don't know where you fit in this story, honestly. But one of my teammates did something that was wrong that put him in jeopardy of, he'd broken one of the rules of the program. And so since we were so close to going to the field, they let the team kind of talk it out. And I was adamant, because here's what the truth is. The sin that this guy had committed, that's a sin I had given up. And I was really super proud of myself. And I was like, well, if I gave it up, how dare you be able to do it and get away with it, kind of thing. So I just had a really terrible self-righteous attitude. And so Michelle, the other assistant, I just don't remember all the timing on this, but she pulled me aside and she was very kind, but she was very direct. And she goes, Jason, I don't think this is about your teammate. I think this is about you. And I would just encourage you, go pray about this. But I think there's something going on inside of you that's causing you to have all this anger, and it has really nothing to do with him. And I was so mad. And I stormed out of that apartment. And it was like 5 minutes later, I'm like, no, she's right. Like, she's right. That I had this huge blind spot, but she was coming along and she was saying, hey, you've got a speck that's causing you to see this situation all wrong. And I needed it and I knew it, but I was so inexperienced with receiving good confrontation. I reacted badly to godly confrontation, godly speck removal. And I just had to grow in it. I mean? So she had, and I went back, matter of fact, I thanked her then, but then she moved to Washington State or Oregon somewhere. And several Ames students from her area knew her and had been encouraged by her and her husband to come to AIM. So now I am training these students. And I would always say to them, hey, when you see Michelle, thank her so much for that confrontation. So then it started to get back to me. Like, I don't know why I didn't just call her or whatever. But anyway, it got back to me. Is that the only thing I did for you? Like, I feel terrible. And I was like, no, that changed my whole view on this thing that God wants for me, So it's just funny, but that's how much it stood out to me.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, but it's important to recognize when you first receive godly confrontation, it will remind you of all the bad confrontations you've either witnessed or experienced yourself. And you gotta just keep offering that to God to let him help you visualize. And not all confrontation is godly. So I'm not suggesting everybody that comes at you is something you're like, oh, that was wonderful. Not at all.
Yeah. So was there something else from your session yesterday that's got me thinking?
Yeah, there was a lot. I'll tell you what happened in the meeting, and it's not so much confidential, but it's but I'll just protect for the people that were there. Several people confessed planks or blind spots, things they really were against, and realized, why am I against that? And they're because, well, it's hard for me or scary for me or whatever, what I mean? And it was just really beautiful. And I think it affected the entirety of the conversation, not because we kept discussing them, or what they said directly, but just that spirit that when somebody takes, as you said, jump in the pool first, it just even makes non-confessional sharing deeper. It just made the whole conversation that much richer and full of life. And I thought that was just brave and beautiful. It just made me really grateful to be part of Memorial Drive. It was just a really beautiful thing.
That really is. I think about the bravery for that first one to jump in, and then for the second one. Like, that sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. And it was, it was very good. Well, for me, looking towards these next sermons, so we're going to cover them. And what we're going to do is we're going to really narrow down and focus on these sins that you will find one of them you struggle with, at least. Now, in my mind, I'm like, I have a story for each of them, but there are some, and you made this point in the sermon, there are some that really will hit you that won't even bother the person next to you.
Mhm.
And that tends to be where our judgmentalism comes in. Whatever I don't struggle with, if you struggle with it, I'm like, well, it's easy. Just don't do that.
Yeah.
But if your struggle was shown to you, you'd be like, this is just who I am. I've got to live like this, and that's the challenge with it. But when you anticipate these lessons, what comes up for you? Are you excited about it? Is it concerned? How do you feel about that?
Oh, when I look at the ones where I realize, oh, that's me, I am afraid. Like
Yeah.
I feel nervous, like, oh man, how much what's appropriate to say out loud. But then we got an email yesterday from someone. I feel like I can probably say who and even what it said, but since I don't have that permission, and they said, when you talk about this theme, I recognize that I don't struggle it in this zone, but I do in this zone.
Right.
And when you just now said, I feel like I could hit on all of them, it reveals to me we all have our lanes, and any of them we may think, oh no, I've got this one covered, but then you bring up a specific side of it, like, yeah, right. I wasn't thinking about that. So it is so vast, and then it makes me nervous. How do we cover all that? Like it's just
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We
so
need
much.
we need you know we need 12 1 hour sermons. Not
Yeah,
6 or 7. 20-minute, 15-minute sermons.
yeah.
Yeah. The one coming up this Sunday is lust. And one of the things that I was taught a while ago, but man, it really is clear to me, um, is the word is not bad. The word lust is not a bad thing. You know, it's the context that they find themselves
Mm,
in that's the bad thing. You know, Jesus will even say he will use that word to communicate something he really, really wants for other people. So they don't translate it using the word lust. They use a
mm,
different word in the English language. But when you notice that, you're like, okay, wait a minute. So where does this get off the rails? You
yeah,
know, and that's the key here. It's not so much, again, how I was raised. We want to identify sin so we can punish that sin. You know, and the spirit there of God is, no, I want you to identify that sin so you can be freed from that sin. You can put it to death, not punish yourself.
yeah,
I mean, if you commit a crime, you need to be punished. If you hurt somebody, there's consequence to that. But it's that idea that he's wanting to liberate you from it. It's much more of a corollary to a doctor identifying a tumor that needs to be removed than a policeman that's identifying the crime so you can now be imprisoned. God's not that policeman type. Now, if you're outside of Christ, if you're refusing Christ, Christ will allow you to experience the
mm,
consequences that you choose, which will ultimately be separation from him. But his spirit, he wants all men to be saved. Paul writes to Timothy, and it's that dynamic that is so important to keep in mind. God's motivation when he talks about sin matters. I mean, it matters dramatically. And so, but we have to take that on,
yeah,
and the honest truth is, for many people, even saying God loves me, really loves me, that's hard for some people to say, even if they've been a Christian for years. So it takes time to really fight through the lessons we've learned and functionally unlearn them so we can learn what it is that God really does mean by these words.
yeah. That takes me back to your word yesterday on competing for the prize, and the Greek being agony, or where we get the word agony, because it does feel like um, we don't just magically switch our brains into living in this new reality. Like we can walk with God for a long time and still think that his view. I checked in with this the other night with a group of friends, I feel like I am not in danger of losing my relationship with God, but in all honesty, I would say he's disappointed. Like that's just how I feel. It's not um he's not angry, he's not threatening to leave, but if he's honest, he's disappointed. And that's just an aftertaste of the sense of life. And so it is a constant um agonizing struggle of moving forward. And I don't mean agonizing. I just mean um it's not pain free. It's not this magical pixie dust and fairies relationship. It's a constant open relationship with God of, hey, how are we doing? How is this going? Um, and I feel like if I ask him, does he love me? And I sit and listen, I I am always pleased by how he tells me he loves me. But but again, it's one of those things where it's kind of this gnawing sense that I choose not to be aware of. I choose not to notice, not to give it a name, and so then it just gnaws at me instead of deciding, or I could draw near to God.
Absolutely. That's right. I love that. Love it so much. I'm always struck by Isaiah, and we've honestly, if somebody's preaching a sermon from Isaiah, it's either rise up in wings like eagles or the worship scene, the
Uh,
throne room scene. But in the throne room scene, there we go. I When Isaiah is there, the people of Isaiah's time esteemed him as the most spiritual person they knew.
mm,
I mean, he was on a pedestal, and in many ways, when you hear him talk, you're like, he was the most spiritually tuned in person in the whole nation. And yet, 1 millisecond in the presence of God, he feels shame.
yeah,
He feels like he's intensely disappointed God. And his defense is basically, I'm unclean. I'm unclean. Like, if I can say it first, it reminds me sometimes when I do something bad to my little brother Jeremy, if I could outrun him to my mom, I would say, Mom, I just need you to know I messed up. I accidentally did this and I made a mistake. By the time Jeremy get there, she's like, Jason already talked to me about it. It's fine. That's like Isaiah. He's like, hey, wait. Before you say anything,
yeah,
I'm unclean. I haven't been, the people are unclean, which is a direct reflection on him because he's the man of God of that generation. And God is not like, you are so right. He just brings this coal, and there's obviously a lot of, symbolism there, but he touches his lips. He's like, you're fine. You're clean. I mean, it takes nothing for God to rectify this whole situation in a
yeah,
millisecond.
yeah,
And I don't know. So when I think, man, I feel like I'm disappointing to God, I'm like, just like Isaiah, you know, and God immediately is like, yeah, I get it,
yeah,
but it's just not true. Not because of who Jason is, not because of who I am,
yeah,
but because of who God is,
yeah,
you know, and that's it. And I think we've kind of pushed back because some people take on God as Santa Claus, which then can translate to God is like this loving grandpa who never asks anything of you. And that's not who God is. But in terms of the way he loves you, it's it's better than Santa. It's better than in terms of affection and tenderness and acceptance and wanting to work with you. Yeah, it's better than the best grandparent,
yeah,
you know. And so I think that's you have to keep it all in perspective. But in terms of how he loves you, it doesn't get more nurturing and forgiving and merciful than that relationship.
right, right. It's a beautiful mystery.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. I like that.
Well, we are moving close to the cutoff time. Um, so if people want to participate in the This Got Me Thinking, how will
Right.
they connect?
Well, very good. I'm going to try to use the same Zoom address. I've never done that before, but I thought that would be smart every time. But yeah, there will be an email that comes out this week. And if I can figure out a place to leave it that wouldn't be to the whole internet, that's what I'd want to do. So I have to ask Shane if there's a way we can do that. But my sense is I'll send out an email on Thursday or Friday, just a reminder, and it's come and go. So it starts at 11. Now we try to end by 11:30, so we're moving fast. But if you can't get on till 10 after, that's great. If you can only get on from 11 to 11:10, that's fine.
Yeah.
Jump in, listen, or share, and then jump off.
Yeah, and if you weren't able to be there Sunday, but will be in the future, because we will continue to have services online or in person. Following services, Scott Eller is leading a Bible class upstairs called "How to Survive the Zombie Apocalypse," which I am fascinated by that title, and I want to know how that goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. He's been very patient doing that class, so I'm really grateful for him.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
See you later.
Bye.